It's wild rose country versus big sky country. Alberta and Montana are locking horns over electricity. I'm Ben Mulrooney. The West Block starts right now. Montana's government claims trade roads to Alberta have been blocked when it comes to selling electricity. We speak with the Republican senator from that state in 2 minutes. And we take the temperature of Canadians' feelings about our southern neighbors, coming up with Darrell Bricker. Also on the show, a heartbreaking case that's led to a charter challenge, and it's being brought before the BC Supreme Court. We hear about Sam O'Neill's story. When it comes to trade irritants between Canada and the U.S., there's one that's flying a bit under the radar: electricity. And Washington is not happy about it, claiming Alberta sometimes blocks Montana from selling electricity to the province. In the nearly 400-page document of what bugs Washington about trading with certain countries, it's written, quote, Alberta Electric System Operator has provided separate and unequal points of access to the Alberta energy market for Montana energy producers. For example, during times of surplus or transmission congestion, Alberta Electric favors electricity generated within Alberta over equally priced U.S. power flowing across the border. The AESO has also proposed additional fees and other restrictions on imported energy. The United States will continue to monitor this issue. Joining us now is Montana Senator Daniel Zolnikov. Senator, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So we know Washington sees this electrical issue as a trade irritant, but how does Montana see it?
We definitely also see it as a trade irritant. It's preventing investment and also reliability and lower market prices for both Alberta and Montana.
Have there been any discussions between your government and the government of Danielle Smith?
It sounds like a minister came down here, but he talked to the Chamber of Commerce and not any of the legislators. Maybe touch base with the governor's office, but it sounds pretty minimal.
Pretty minimal, huh? Well, Alberta's electricity reps have said that they don't believe Montana is being treated unfairly. In fact, they say any decision that's made by the AESO has to do with reliability of their grid. Have you heard that argument?
Yeah, and the issue with the reliability of their grid is they upgraded, or they basically transitioned renewables very quickly, but without actually upgrading their transmission system. That's like saying we're going to go to electric cars, but not worry about the fact that we only have gas stations and not electric chargers. And you can't do that kind of upgrade without making sure that the new type of resources can balance on the grid, and they did not do that. So they're just very behind on reliability standards.
Senator, Washington and Ottawa, it's no secret, haven't been seeing eye to eye lately, to say the least. So Canada overall has been moving away from depending on the U.S. for trade. Is that affecting Montana in any way?
Yeah, so what Alberta does on this situation is they shut down our resources going north. Think of it as like a 3-lane highway, but then all of a sudden there's only 1 lane open. We treat their resources the exact same as we treat out-of-state and in-state resources. We treat everything with parity. They're treating us differently, which is now affecting possible investment to do more transmission building into Alberta, which I want as a state. The more access, the more markets, the lower the market price for our consumers on energy.
You know, we're living in a time where the president fiercely defends U.S. interests to the point that if he feels that someone's being treated unfairly, there is we can expect retaliation. Is this something that Canada should brace for, or retaliation on this electrical front?
I don't believe so, because this is a common sense issue. If they allow for more market access, we benefit, they benefit. Let me just give you a quick one. Alberta is only focusing and benefiting their own generators, which means there are other areas in Canada that are also treated unfair, like Montana, which means that Alberta consumers are paying the highest prices because they're not allowing the market energy prices to come in from Montana or other areas, which would lower the price. Think of $40 wind in Alberta, $25 wind in Montana. They said, nope, we're going to use all of Alberta's wind first and then Montana's. That is affecting Alberta consumers and make them pay more than they should.
Do you feel, Senator, that Donald Trump's tactics, changing his ideas on tariffs, sometimes at the last minute, do you feel that by and large it has been effective?
I would say that there are more favorable trade agreements, and I would also say, the previous administrations tend to just say, oh, whatever makes you happy, and we end up paying for it. And situations like this, free trade benefits all, like I just stated. So I'm not an expert on his tactics. I do know that there has been significant changes across the world that have benefited a lot of entities.
Do you feel personally that the Canada-U.S. trade relationship can be healed, can be saved?
Oh, definitely. There are only six issues, and this is one of them. And again, I've worked in energy, been in politics for 12, 14 years, working on this type of issue. This is common sense, basic trade agreement. This one makes sense. Get the other ones out of the way, work through them, and we should be good to go.
Because from what we're hearing here is the president is saying sometimes he's not even thinking about the renegotiation of USMCA. Do you think that's a negotiating tactic? Do you think he's positioning himself to ultimately sit down at the table? Or should we in Canada be worried that free trade will be going the way of the dodo bird?
Well, if you've seen what's happened with other countries, it's basically all been worked out. So I would always stay at the table and listen. People do have different tactics at this. Again, I'm not an expert on the president's ability to negotiate. What I'm an expert on is Montana and what we have going on the energy side. And this is one of, again, the six issues in the trade agreement. So if we figure this one out, then there's only five left. And the easiest way to figure this out is for Alberta to put it into code that they're going to start following NERC standards with reliability and treat us fairly, just like everybody else. 1 out of 6 is done, and now you're on the way to a trade agreement.
Well, my last question for you has little to do with energy, more to do with you as an expert on Montana. I think so many people, including in Canada, fell in love with Montana as we saw it in the show Yellowstone. And I know parts of it weren't shot there, but I have to wonder that it was as if that was an ad to come to Montana, come visit Montana. And I wondered what impact that show had on your state.
I had a pretty harsh impact because so many people came here and then they forgot to leave. And what happened is they bought homes, and we have a very small market. So it only takes 10,000 people, 20,000 people to have home prices just blow up because we have 1.2 million people in a state the size of Germany. So all that happened was our home prices went from a good 250,000 to 450,000 in Yellowstone County. And then it went even more drastically in Flathead, Missoula, Bozeman area. So it hurt us a lot, but that's the benefit of living in the greatest state in the country, is people found out who we are, what we are, and they wanted to stay.
Senator, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
There seems to be no end in sight to the tariff war between Washington and Ottawa. Just last week, President Donald Trump said this in Detroit.
I don't even think about USMCA. We don't need their product. We don't need cars made in Canada. We don't need cars made in Mexico. We want to make them here.
You don't think you're going to renegotiate USMCA?
Well, I can. It expires very shortly, and we could have it or not. It wouldn't matter to me. I think they want it. I don't really care about it. No real advantage to us. It's irrelevant to me. Canada would love it. Canada wants it. They need it because we don't need Canada product. That's the thing. I want to be a nice person, but we don't need. I want to build the cars here, not in Canada.
To talk about how Canadians are feeling about that right now, we're joined by Ipsos CEO Darrell Bricker. Thank you so much for coming in, Darrell.
Thanks for having me on, Ben.
Okay, first question. Let's start with Canadian relations with the U.S. What did you find?
Well, Canadian relations with the U.S. today are god-awful, but it's changing a bit over the space of the last year, where 79%, I think it was, that said that actually they were getting worse. That number is way, way down. But it's more because people are moving into the category of it's the same, so It's bad anyway. It's not that it's getting worse, it's just bad in general.
Well, in regards to Canada-U.S. trade, are Canadians getting impatient? The Prime Minister promised us a deal by last summer. However, feels to me like a lot of people are not resigned to, but accepting of the argument, no deal is better than a bad deal.
And this is one of the big advantages Mark Carney has in all of this. People's expectations on getting a reasonable deal with the United States are actually quite low. 67% say this year we won't be able to achieve it.
Next, you ask Canadians if they would join the U.S.
Definitely not, and in fact, less so now than when we first asked the question a couple of years ago, and again last year. We used to be up around, I think around 30% we're considering, and it's now dropped down to about 16.
Now, about the question, what about the next federal election? Are Canadians feeling ready to go back to the polls?
No.
No.
If you're an opposition voter, you are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if you're a government supporter, no, they want to let the government run. It's about 50-50. I should say, compared to when we were asking this before the election with Justin Trudeau, more people are interested in an election today than we saw, say, for example, a year before Justin Trudeau.
Really?
Yeah, interesting.
Oh, interesting. Let's talk about if Canada is on the right track. Because you asked a lot of countries around the world. Let's start with Canada. What were their responses?
40% of us, 39% say that we're on the right track. But that puts us kind of in the middle of the pack. There's a lot of countries, particularly in the global south, that are much more optimistic about the future, much more optimistic about their country.
Southern Hemisphere.
In the southern hemisphere, yeah.
Now, you asked the same question in the United States. What was their reaction?
Almost identical to Canada. So you would think with all of the carnage that's going on in the United States right now, you'd have a whole group of people that thinking, a much larger group of people thinking they're on the wrong track, but it's about the same as Canada.
I would have assumed it was 50-50. I would have assumed that those who are firmly in Trump's camp are listening to him talking about we're bringing jobs back, we're bringing investment in, and then you'd have those who look at the sort of the social side of things and they see the ICE raids and that, and I just assumed it would be a toss-up.
No, actually, when you take a look at American public opinion, the tariffs are quite controversial. The effects of the tariffs, the status of the economy right now. We just put out some new polling on ICE in the United States, and actually people are quite negative about it, including Republicans.
Interesting. What about France? What did people say about whether France is on the right track?
So if you want, you always need somebody you're competing against. The best competition that Canada can have right now is France. Only 10% of the French population think that they're on the right track.
France, if they feel that bad about their future prospects?
Well, the political situation in France right now is quite catastrophic. The president of France is very, very low approval numbers, even lower than Justin Trudeau's approval numbers were. And the chaos that they have in their parliament right now and their inability to get a budget through has made people deeply, deeply skeptical. Is
Mark Carney still in the honeymoon phase?
Definitely still in the honeymoon phase. And the reason for that is there's really no buyer's remorse about Pierre Poilievre versus Mark Carney. Canadians feel they picked the right person for the moment, but also the expectations on him are not that high.
See, I find that interesting because he placed them personally at a very high level.
I think Canadians are kind of looking at what he's up against, particularly dealing with Donald Trump, and they feel that he has the background and the skills and the presentation, the physical presentation of somebody who's a serious individual made for these kinds of times. But they also realize that by the same token, what he's up against. There's really no buyer's remorse about whether or not they should have elected Pierre Poilievre.
What are you seeing overall in terms of issues for the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party of Canada?
At the moment, at the top of the list remains affordability. This is why an election today and an election last April end up with the same kind of results, basically, if you take a look at what's going on. So affordability is at the top of the list. The Liberals still have a huge advantage on trade with the United States and dealing with the United States, but the Conservatives have a big advantage on issues like crime. And on issues like, for example, immigration. So if those two sleeper issues start becoming the big issues in the Canadian political circumstance that we find ourselves in, then I think you're going to start seeing some changes in vote numbers.
And would you say the same thing about sort of the pervasiveness of those issues? Meaning, if they stick around, if they linger, if the issue of affordability is still an issue a year, 2 years from now, if the issue of housing, people being priced out of the housing market, if youth unemployment is still high, are those going to be issues in the next election?
For the people who voted for the Conservative Party, they still remain the germane issues. So if you look at who's most likely to name those as the most important issues, they're people in that younger category, people who feel that the Canadian promise is not paying off for them. Older people are still more interested in issues like, for example, free trade with the United States.
What about, lastly, some of the wild cards when it comes to Canadian politics?
I think the real wild cards are on the issue list that you were talking about before. So, for example, the immigration system has been somewhat in chaos over the last while. If that really starts to emerge in a very difficult way in Canada, that's a big change that works to the advantage of Conservatives. I think crime is a big issue that people are concerned about, particularly in our cities and our suburbs. suburbs in Canada. And if that continues to be a really prominent issue, that's also something that works for the Conservatives, particularly since these types of issues are really big in the 905 and car commuting suburbs, and that's where elections get decided in our country.
Darrell Bricker, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben.